Hello, everyone. My name is Emily, and welcome to English Club. I am so happy you are here today. We make videos to help you learn English. Today, we have a very helpful and practical topic. But first, let me say hello to my friend Paul. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Emily. Hello, everyone. I am Paul. It is so nice to be here today. How are you doing, Emily?
I am doing very well. Thank you so much for asking, Paul. I am really excited today because we are going to talk about something that everyone does every day. How about you? How are you feeling today?
I am doing great, Emily. Thank you for asking. Yes, I am also very excited about today's topic. It is something we all do naturally, but it is important to know how to do it properly in English. So, did you have a good weekend?
Yes, I had a really nice weekend, Paul. Actually, something interesting happened. My friend called me because she had a problem at work. She did not know what to do, so she asked me for advice. We talked for about an hour, and I tried to help her think about her options.
Oh, that is very kind of you, Emily. It is good to help friends when they have problems. Did your advice help her? Did she feel better after talking to you?
Yes, I think so, Paul. She said she felt much better after our conversation. I did not tell her exactly what to do, but I helped her think about different possibilities. Sometimes people just need someone to listen and give suggestions, you know?
That is so true, Emily. Good advice is not always about telling someone what to do. Sometimes it's about helping them see things from a different perspective. So, do you often give advice to your friends?
Yes, quite often, Paul. And my friends also give me advice when I have problems. I think giving and receiving advice is a normal part of friendship. We help each other make decisions and solve problems. What about you, Paul? Do people ask you for advice?
Yes, they do, Emily. My younger brother often asks me for advice about his career and his studies. And my colleagues sometimes ask me for advice about work-related issues. I try to be helpful, but I am always careful not to be too pushy or controlling.
That is very wise, Paul. Being careful with how we give advice is really important. We want to be helpful, not bossy or judgmental. And I think that is a perfect introduction to our topic today.
Yes, absolutely, Emily. Okay, so everyone, before we start today's topic, please like and subscribe to our channel for more English learning videos. We really appreciate your support. It helps us a lot.
Yes, please do subscribe. We make new videos every week to help you learn English. And if you like our videos, please click the like button. It really helps us continue making content for you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Okay, Emily, so today we are going to talk about how to give advice in English. This is a very practical topic because we all give and receive advice regularly in our daily lives.
Exactly, Paul. Whether we are talking to friends, family, colleagues, or even strangers, there are many situations where we need to give advice or suggestions. And it is important to know how to do this politely and appropriately in English.
That is right, Emily. Giving advice is something we do all the time, but the way we give advice can make a big difference. We need to know the right words, the right tone, and the right level of directness. So let us start with the basics. What exactly is advice?
Good question, Paul. Advice is a suggestion or recommendation about what someone should do in a particular situation. When you give advice, you are sharing your opinion about the best action or decision for someone. For example, if your friend is tired, you might give advice like, "You should get more sleep."
Perfect explanation, Emily. And there are different ways to give advice in English. Some ways are very direct and strong, and other ways are softer and more polite. We need to choose the right way depending on the situation and the person we are talking to.
Absolutely, Paul. So let us talk about the different structures we can use to give advice. The most common and simple way is using should. For example, you should study more or you should eat healthy food. Should is very common for giving advice.
Yes, Emily, should is probably the most popular word for giving advice. It is direct but still polite. We use it when we think something is a good idea or the right thing to do. For example, if someone is always late, we can say, you should leave home earlier, or you should set an alarm.
Good examples, Paul. Another common structure is using should not or shouldn't for negative advice. This is when we advise someone not to do something. For example, you shouldn't eat too much sugar, or you shouldn't stay up so late.
Exactly, Emily. Shouldn't is very useful for warning someone or telling them to avoid something. Now, another way to give advice is using ought to. This is very similar to should, but it is a little less common and slightly more formal. For example, you ought to see a doctor, or you ought to apologize to her.
Yes, Paul. Ought to has the same meaning as should, but some people find it sounds a bit old-fashioned or formal. I think should is more natural in everyday conversation, but it is good to know ought to as well because you might hear it or read it.
I agree, Emily. Now, let us talk about another very common structure. We can use had better to give strong advice, especially when we want to warn someone about consequences. For example, you had better hurry or you will miss the bus. Or, you had better study hard or you will fail the exam.
Good examples, Paul. Had better is stronger than should. It often implies that something bad will happen if the person does not follow the advice. We often contract it to you'd better in speaking. For example, you'd better leave now, or you'd better not do that.
Yes, Emily, the contraction is very common. Now, if we want to give advice in a softer, more polite way, we can use could. For example, you could try talking to him, or you could ask your teacher for help. Could make suggestions without being too direct or pushy.
Excellent point, Paul. Could is great when you want to give options or possibilities rather than direct advice. It sounds gentler and less commanding. For example, if someone is bored, you could say, you could read a book, or you could watch a movie. You are giving ideas, not orders.
Exactly, Emily. Another soft way to give advice is using might want to. For example, you might want to bring an umbrella. It looks like rain. Or, you might want to check your email. I think there's a message for you.
This is very gentle and polite.
Yes, Emily. Might want to is perfect for casual, friendly advice. It is not pushy at all. It's like saying, maybe this is a good idea for you. Now, another way to give advice is using if I were you. This is a very common expression. For example, if I were you, I would talk to the manager. Or, if I were you, I wouldn't worry about it. Great structure, Emily. If I were you is really useful because it shows you are putting yourself in the other person's situation. You are imagining what you would do if you had their problem. It sounds empathetic and understanding. For example, if I were you, I would apologize immediately.
Exactly, Paul. This structure shows empathy and makes your advice sound less bossy. Now, we can also give advice using why don't you? For example, why don't you take a break? Or why don't you ask for help? This sounds like a friendly suggestion.
Yes, Emily. Why don't you is very natural and conversational. It is a question form, so it sounds softer than a direct command. For example, if someone is stressed, you can say, why don't you go for a walk? Or why don't you talk to someone about it?
Perfect examples, Paul. Another similar structure is how about or what about. For example, how about trying a different approach? Or what about calling him directly? These are also gentle ways to make suggestions.
Yes, Emily. How about and what about are great for offering options. They invite the person to consider your suggestion without pressure. For example, what about meeting tomorrow instead? Or how about we discuss this later?
Excellent, Paul. Now let us talk about giving advice using imperatives. An imperative is when we use the base form of the verb to give a command or instruction. For example, take your time, or be careful, or think about it carefully. Imperatives are very direct.
Yes, Emily. Imperatives can sound quite strong, so we need to be careful when we use them. They are appropriate with close friends or family, or in emergency situations. For example, stop, or watch out, or hurry up. But with strangers or informal situations, imperatives can sound rude.
That is a very important point, Paul. The tone and relationship matter a lot when giving advice. We can soften imperatives by adding please. For example, please think about it, or please be careful. This makes it sound more polite.
Good tip, Emily. Now, sometimes we want to give advice, but we do not want to be too direct. We can use maybe you should or perhaps you could. These words make the advice sound like a gentle suggestion rather than a strong recommendation.
Yes, Paul. Maybe and perhaps are very useful. For example, maybe you should call her, or perhaps you could try again tomorrow. These sound much softer and less pushy. The person feels they have a choice.
Exactly, Emily. Another way to soften advice is to phrase it as a question. For example, have you thought about asking for help? Or have you considered taking a course? These questions make the person think about the option without feeling pressured.
Great examples, Paul. Questions are wonderful for giving advice indirectly. We can also say, do you think it would be a good idea to? Or would it help if you? For example, do you think it would be a good idea to talk to your boss? Or would it help if you made a list?
Yes, Emily, these questions sound very respectful and collaborative. You are not telling the person what to do, you are helping them think about possibilities. Now, let us talk about when and how to give advice. What are the situations where people usually give advice?
Well, Paul, we give advice in many situations. Friends ask for advice about relationships, career decisions, or personal problems. For example, a friend might say, I am having problems with my boyfriend. What should I do? And you give advice based on your experience or opinion.
Yes, Emily. Family members also ask for advice. Parents give advice to children about school, behavior, and life decisions. Children might ask parents for advice about work or money. For example, a young person might ask their parent, should I take this job offer or wait for something better?
Exactly, Paul. We also give advice at work. Colleagues might ask for advice about projects, tasks, or workplace issues. A manager might give advice to employees about how to improve their performance. For example, I think you should focus more on time management.
Good example, Emily. We also give advice to people we do not know well sometimes. For example, if you see a tourist looking lost, you might give advice like, you should take the bus number 10, it goes to the city center. Or if someone asks for restaurant recommendations, you can say, you should try the Italian restaurant on Main Street. It is excellent.
Yes, Paul. And sometimes we give advice even when people do not ask for it. But we need to be very careful with unsolicited advice. Unsolicited means not asked for. Some people do not like receiving advice they did not request. It can seem rude or interfering.
That is a really important point, Emily. We should usually wait for people to ask before giving advice. If we give advice without being asked, we should be very gentle and respectful. We can start by saying, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but, or, can I offer a suggestion?
Excellent, Paul. Those phrases show respect and give the person a chance to say no if they do not want advice. Now, let us talk about how to respond when someone gives us advice. What can we say when someone gives us suggestions?
Good question, Emily. If the advice is helpful, we can say, thank you for the advice, or that is a good idea, I will think about it, or I appreciate your suggestion. These responses show gratitude and respect.
Yes, Paul. We can also say, I had not thought of that, or that makes sense, or you are right, I should do that. These responses show we are taking the advice seriously and considering it.
Exactly, Emily. But sometimes we receive advice that we do not agree with or do not want to follow. In this case, we need to respond politely without being rude. We can say, thank you, but I think I will handle it differently. Or, I appreciate your concern, but I have already decided. Or, that is an interesting perspective. I will think about it.
Perfect responses, Paul. These are polite ways to acknowledge the advice without committing to follow it. We show appreciation for the person's concern, but we also maintain our independence and right to make our own decisions.
Yes, Emily. It is important to be tactful. We do not want to hurt someone's feelings or seem ungrateful, but we also don't have to follow every piece of advice we receive. Now, let us talk about some common mistakes people make when giving advice.
Good idea, Paul. One common mistake is being too direct or bossy. If you say, you must do this or you have to do that, it sounds like a command, not advice. It can make people feel defensive or annoyed.
Yes, Emily. Must and have to are too strong for advice. They are better for rules or obligations. For advice, should, could, and might are better choices. Another mistake is giving too much advice at once. If you give someone 10 different suggestions, they will feel overwhelmed.
That is so true, Paul. It is better to give 1 or 2 clear suggestions rather than a long list of advice. Keep it simple and focused. Another mistake is giving advice without understanding the situation fully. We should listen carefully and ask questions before offering advice.
Excellent point, Emily. Sometimes people just want to talk and be heard. They do not actually want advice. They want sympathy or support. So we should listen first and ask, do you want my advice, or would you like some suggestions before jumping in with solutions?
Very wise, Paul. Another mistake is being judgmental. If we say, "What is wrong with you? Why did you do that?" or "That was stupid," we are not giving advice. We are criticizing. Good advice is supportive and constructive, not judgmental.
Absolutely, Emily. Advice should be kind and helpful, never harsh or critical. We should focus on solutions, not blame. Now, let us talk about advice in different contexts. How do we give advice in formal situations versus informal situations?
Good question, Paul. In formal situations, like at work or with people we do not know well, we should use polite, indirect language. We can say, "I would recommend," "I would suggest," "It might be advisable to," or "You may want to consider." These sound professional and respectful.
Yes, Emily. For example, in a business meeting, you might say, I would suggest we review the data before making a decision, or it might be advisable to consult with the legal team. These are formal and diplomatic.
Exactly, Paul. In informal situations, with friends and family, we can be more direct and casual. We can use contractions and simpler language. For example, "You should totally watch that movie," or "Why don't you just tell them how you feel?" This sounds friendly and natural.
Yes, Emily. With close friends, we can even be more blunt, like, dude, you need to get more sleep. Or, seriously, you should quit that job. It is making you miserable. This direct style is acceptable with people who know us well and trust our intentions.
Good examples, Paul. The relationship and context always matter. Now, let us talk about giving advice about health. This is a common topic, but we need to be careful. If someone has a serious health problem, we should not pretend to be doctors.
That is very important, Emily. For minor health issues, we can give simple advice like, you should drink more water, or you should get some rest. But for serious problems, we should say, you should see a doctor, or I think you need professional medical advice.
Exactly, Paul. We should never give medical advice if we are not qualified. It could be dangerous. The same is true for legal advice or financial advice. For serious matters, we should recommend professional help.
Absolutely, Emily. Now, let us talk about some useful phrases and expressions for giving advice. We have already covered many, but let me summarize. For direct advice, we have you should, you ought to, and you had better. For softer advice, we have you could, you might want to, and maybe you should.
Yes, Paul. For advice based on personal experience, we have, "If I were you, I would," and "In my opinion, you should." For suggestions, we have, "Why don't you?" "How about?" and "What about?" And for very polite advice, we have, "I would recommend," "I would suggest," and "It might be a good idea to."
Perfect summary, Emily. We also have some phrases for introducing advice, like, can I give you some advice? Or, do you want to hear my opinion? Or, here is what I think you should do. These prepare the person to receive advice.
Good additions, Paul. And we have phrases for softening advice, like, "I'm not sure, but," "I might be wrong, but," "This is just a suggestion, but," and "You do not have to, but."
Excellent, Emily. Now let us talk about cultural differences in giving advice. Different cultures have different attitudes about advice. In some cultures, people give advice very directly. In other cultures, people are more indirect and subtle.
That is very true, Paul. In some cultures, it is normal for older people or people in authority to give strong, direct advice. They might say, "You must do this," or "You should not do that." This is seen as caring and helpful, not rude.
Yes, Emily, but in other cultures, especially in English-speaking countries like the UK and the US, people prefer softer, more indirect advice. They value personal independence and choice, so advice is often phrased as suggestions rather than commands.
Exactly, Paul. This is why it is important to learn the cultural norms of the language you are learning. In English, it is generally better to be polite and indirect with advice, especially with people you do not know well or in professional situations.
Very important point, Emily. Now, let us talk about advice columns and advice content. In English-speaking countries, there are advice columns in newspapers and magazines where people write in with problems and receive advice from experts.
Yes, Paul. These advice columns are very popular. People ask questions about relationships, work, family, money, and all kinds of life problems. The advice columnists respond with suggestions and guidance. Reading advice columns is actually a good way to learn English and see how advice is given.
Great tip, Emily. There are also many advice podcasts and YouTube channels where people discuss problems and give advice. These are good resources for learning natural English and understanding how advice works in English-speaking culture.
Absolutely, Paul. Now, let me share some example situations and appropriate advice. If your friend says, "I am always tired," you could say, "You should try to get 8 hours of sleep each night," or "Maybe you should exercise more." Exercise can give you more energy.
Good examples, Emily. If a colleague says, "I am nervous about my presentation tomorrow," you could say, "Don't worry, you will do great." Or, "Why don't you practice one more time tonight?" Or, "If I were you, I would take some deep breaths before you start."
Excellent, Paul. If your brother says, "I want to improve my English," you could say, "You should watch English movies with subtitles." Or, "How about joining an English conversation group?" Or, "I recommend using English learning apps every day."
Perfect advice, Emily. If a friend says, "I am having problems with my roommate," you could say, "Maybe you should have an honest conversation with them." Or, "Have you thought about setting some house rules together?" Or, "It might help if you spent some time apart."
Great suggestions, Paul. If someone says, "I cannot decide which job offer to accept," you could say, "You could make a list of pros and cons for each job." Or, "Think about which one offers more opportunities for growth." Or, "I would choose the one that makes you happiest, not just the one with higher salary."
Excellent advice, Emily. These examples show how to give practical, helpful advice in different situations. Now, let us talk about the difference between advice and criticism. Some people confuse these two things, but they are very different.
That is an important distinction, Paul. Advice is forward-looking. It focuses on what someone can do to improve a situation or solve a problem. It is constructive and helpful. Criticism is backward-looking. It focuses on what someone did wrong in the past. It can be negative and unhelpful.
Exactly, Emily. For example, if someone fails an exam, criticism would be, "You did not study enough. You were lazy." This focuses on the past and does not help. Advice would be, "Next time, you should make a study schedule and start preparing earlier." This focuses on future improvement.
Perfect example, Paul. Good advice is always constructive. It helps people move forward and do better. It is not about making people feel bad about the past. Now, I want to talk about the importance of listening before giving advice.
Great topic, Emily. Yes, listening is crucial. Before we give advice, we need to fully understand the situation. We should ask questions like, "What happened?" Or, "How do you feel about it?" Or, "What have you tried so far?" This shows we care and helps us give better advice.
Absolutely, Paul. Sometimes people don't want advice at all. They just want someone to listen and understand. We can ask, "Would you like me to just listen, or do you want advice?" This is very respectful and considerate.
Excellent approach, Emily. And even when giving advice, we should validate the person's feelings first. We can say, "I understand why you feel that way," or "That must be really difficult for you," before offering suggestions. This makes our advice more compassionate and effective.
Very wise, Paul. Now, let us talk about advice for common life situations. For someone who wants to lose weight, we might say, "You should eat more vegetables and less junk food." Or, "How about going for a walk every day?" Or, "You could join a gym or find an exercise buddy for motivation."
Good advice, Emily. For someone who wants to save money, we might say, you should make a budget and track your spending. Or, why don't you cook at home more instead of eating out? Or, you could set up automatic savings from each paycheck.
Excellent, Paul. For someone who wants to make new friends, we might say, you should join clubs or groups based on your interests. Or, how about volunteering? You will meet people who care about the same causes. Or, you could take a class to learn something new and meet people.
Great suggestions, Emily. For someone who is stressed, we might say, you should try meditation or deep breathing exercises. Or, maybe you need to take a break and do something you enjoy. Or, if I were you, I would talk to someone about what is stressing you out.
Perfect advice, Paul. Now, I want to emphasize that good advice is specific, not vague. Instead of saying, you should be more positive, it is better to say, you could try writing down 3 good things that happened each day. This is more actionable.
Excellent point, Emily. Specific, practical advice is much more helpful than general statements. People can actually do something with specific advice. Now, let us talk about following up on advice. If we give someone advice, it's nice to check in later and ask, how did it go? Or, did my suggestion help?
Yes, Paul. Following up shows we genuinely care. It is not just about giving advice and forgetting about it. We want to support the person through their situation. And if our advice didn't work, we can offer different suggestions or just offer emotional support.
Absolutely, Emily. Now, I think we should summarize all the main points we have covered today. We have learned many ways to give advice in English, from direct to indirect, from formal to informal.
Yes, Paul. We learned structures like should, ought to, had better, could, might want to, if I were you, why don't you, how about, and what about. We learned when to use each one and how to choose the right level of directness.
Exactly, Emily. We talked about the importance of being polite and respectful when giving advice. We discussed listening before advising and asking if someone wants advice. We covered the difference between advice and criticism.
Yes, Paul. We talked about giving advice in different contexts, from health to work to personal life. We discussed cultural differences and the importance of being specific and practical with our suggestions.
Perfect summary, Emily. We also learned how to respond when someone gives us advice and how to decline advice politely if we do not want to follow it. This is a complete guide to giving and receiving advice in English.
I agree, Paul. I hope everyone feels more confident now about giving advice in English. Remember, the key is to be helpful, kind, and respectful. Advice should empower people, not make them feel bad or pressured.
Beautifully said, Emily. Well, I think we have covered this topic very thoroughly. We have shared so much useful vocabulary, many practical examples, and important cultural insights. I hope everyone has learned something valuable today.
I hope so too, Paul. This has been a really helpful conversation. Thank you so much for discussing this important topic with me today.
Thank you too, Emily. It was a great discussion. I enjoyed it very much.
That is wonderful, Paul. Okay, everyone. Before we finish today, I want to ask you a question. We would love to hear from you. So please leave a comment and tell us, what is the best advice you have ever received? Who gave it to you and how did it help you?
Yes, please share with us in the comments. We love hearing your stories and experiences. Good advice can change our lives, so we are very curious to know about the advice that helped you. Your comments also help other learners practice reading and writing English.
That is right, Paul. So please take a moment to write a comment. It can be short and simple, or you can share a detailed story. We read all of your comments and we appreciate each one.
And remember, everyone, please like and subscribe to English Club for more English learning videos. We make new videos every week to help you improve your English. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue creating content.
Yes, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow and reach more English learners around the world. Thank you so much for listening today. We appreciate you taking the time to learn with us.
Thank you for spending time with us today. We hope you found this lesson useful and practical. Keep practicing your English every day, and don't be afraid to give and receive advice in English.
Yes, practice giving advice with your friends and family. The more you practice, the more natural it will become. You are doing wonderfully. Keep up the great work.
Goodbye, everyone. Keep learning, keep growing, and see you in the next video.
Goodbye. And remember, please like and subscribe to English Club for more English learning videos. Thank you for listening.